The air was thick with the kind of tension that makes your chest tighten, the kind that whispers something's about to break. I stood on the porch of Lila's house, my best friend since we were kids trading Pokemon cards in the back of her dad's pickup truck. But tonight, as the sunset bled orange across the sleepy streets of Willow Creek, Oregon, I wasn't here for Lila. My name's Ethan Carter, 25, lanky with a mop of brown hair I can never quite tame. I'm the guy who's always been good at fading into the background, safe, unremarkable, the friend who's always there. But tonight, my heart was pounding so hard I swore it would crack my ribs. I wasn't here for Lila. I was here for her brother, Caleb. Caleb Monroe, 24, with his sharp jawline, dark eyes that could pin you in place, and a quiet intensity that made you feel like the only person in the world when he looked at you. We'd been circling each other for months. Late-night talks in his car, stolen glances at Lila's birthday party, moments where our hands brushed and neither of us pulled away. But Willow Creek wasn't the kind of place where two guys could just be together. Not without consequences. I knocked on the door, my knuckles grazing the chipped red paint. The house was a modest two-story, the kind you'd see in any small American town. White siding, a creaky porch swing, a mailbox with the Monroes scrawled in fading letters. Lila was supposed to be home. She texted me an hour ago, begging me to come over and help her prep for her grad school interview. But when the door swung open, it wasn't Lila standing there. It was her dad, Richard Monroe. Richard was a mountain of a man, 50, with a grizzled beard and eyes like cold steel. He owned the town's only auto shop, and his hands were perpetually stained with grease, like he carried the weight of every engine he'd ever fixed. He looked at me, his gaze narrowing, and I felt the air shift, like stepping into a room where something dangerous had just been said. "Ethan," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "Lila's not here." I swallowed, my throat dry. "She texted me. Said she needed help with. She's at the library." He cut me off, stepping onto the porch and pulling the door shut behind him. His flannel shirt strained against his broad shoulders, and there was a glint in his eye I didn't like. "But you're not here for her, are you?" My stomach dropped. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words caught in my throat. Richard took a step closer, his boots heavy on the wooden boards. "I've seen you," he said, his voice a low growl. "The way you look at my son." The world tilted. I'd spent months hiding how I felt about Caleb, burying it under jokes and casual hangouts, convincing myself no one could tell. But Richard's eyes were like a spotlight, burning through every lie I'd told myself. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, but my voice cracked, betraying me. "Don't lie to me, boy." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint tang of motor oil on him. "You think I don't know what's going on? You think I haven't noticed Caleb sneaking out at night, coming home with that look in his eyes? I know it's you." My pulse hammered in my ears. I wanted to run, to bolt down the street and never look back, but my feet were glued to the porch. Richard's face softened for a split second, and I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd let it go. But then he leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "You stay away from him, Ethan, or I'll make sure you regret it." Before I could respond, the door creaked open behind him. Caleb stood there, his black hair slightly mussed, his glasses reflecting the dying light. He was lean, not as tall as his dad, but there was a fire in him that made him seem bigger. "Dad," he said, his voice steady but sharp. "What's going on?" Richard didn't turn. His eyes stayed locked on me, a warning carved into every line of his face. "Just talking to your friend here," he said, the word friend dripping with venom. Caleb's gaze flicked to me, and I saw it, the worry, the fear, but also something fierce, something that said he wasn't backing down. "Ethan, come inside," he said, stepping aside to hold the door open. I hesitated, my eyes darting between Caleb and his father. Richard's jaw tightened, but he stepped back, giving me just enough space to slip past. As I crossed the threshold, my shoulder brushed Caleb's, and for a moment, the world felt right again. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and old books, the kind of place that felt lived in, warm. Lila's sketches were pinned to the fridge, and a half-finished puzzle sat on the coffee table. But the air was heavy, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Caleb shut the door, his hand lingering on the knob. "What did he say to you?" he asked, his voice low. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. How do you tell someone their dad just threatened you for loving them? How do you explain the way your heart's been breaking and mending itself every time they're near? "He knows," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Caleb's face hardened. He glanced toward the living room, where Richard had disappeared, then back at me. "He doesn't get to decide this," he said, stepping closer. His hand found mine, his fingers warm and steady, grounding me. Not for me, not for us. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But Willow Creek was small, and secrets like ours didn't stay buried for long. I could still feel Richard's eyes on me, his words echoing in my head. And somewhere deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The living room was dim, lit only by a single lamp in the corner that cast long shadows across the hardwood floor. Caleb's hand was still in mine, his grip firm, like he was anchoring us both against the storm brewing outside. I could hear Richard's boots pacing in the kitchen, each step a reminder of the line we'd just crossed. "Caleb," I whispered, my voice shaky. "This isn't safe. Your dad." He meant what he said. Caleb's eyes, dark and unyielding, met mine. "I'm not afraid of him," he said, but the slight tremor in his voice betrayed him. He was 24, but in that moment he looked younger, like the kid I'd seen cry when his dog got hit by a car back in middle school. "I'm tired of hiding, Ethan. Aren't you?" Hiding was exhausting. Every dodged glance, every careful word, every time I laughed too loud to cover how much I wanted to reach for him. But fear was a powerful thing, and in a town like Willow Creek, it wasn't just about us. It was about the whispers at the diner, the stares at church, the way people's smiles turned sharp when they thought no one was watching. Before I could answer, the front door swung open, and Lila burst in, her blonde curls bouncing as she kicked off her sneakers. At 22, she was a whirlwind of energy, always moving, always talking. She froze when she saw us, her eyes darting to our joined hands. Okay, what did I miss?" she said, her voice light but curious. She dropped her backpack by the couch and crossed her arms, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. "You two finally gonna spill? Or do I have to guess?" Caleb let go of my hand, but not before giving it a quick squeeze. "It's nothing," he said too quickly. Lila raised an eyebrow. "Nothing? Caleb, you look like you just saw a ghost, and Ethan's got that deer in headlights thing going on." "Spill." I opened my mouth, but no words came. Lila was my best friend, the one who'd patched me up after every heartbreak, who'd laughed with me until we couldn't breathe. But telling her about Caleb felt like stepping off a cliff. What if she didn't get it? What if she looked at me differently? "Lila," Caleb said, his voice steady now. "Ethan and I were together." The room went silent. Lila's smirk faded, replaced by something softer, something I couldn't quite read. She looked at me, then at Caleb, and for a moment I braced myself for the worst. Then she grinned. "About damn time," she said, punching Caleb lightly on the shoulder. "I was wondering how long you two were gonna dance around it." Relief flooded through me, so strong I almost laughed. "You're not weirded out?" I asked. Lila rolled her eyes. Ethan, I've known you since we were 10. You think I didn't notice the way you look at my brother? I'm just mad you didn't tell me sooner. She paused, her expression turning serious. But Dad, he's not going to be okay with this. The weight of her words settled over us like a fog. Caleb's jaw tightened, and he glanced toward the kitchen, where Richard's pacing had stopped. He already knows, Caleb said quietly. Lila's eyes widened. What? How? He saw us, I said, my voice barely audible. Outside. He told me to stay away from Caleb. Lila cursed under her breath, running a hand through her curls. That's not good. He's old school, you know? He's got this idea of what a family's supposed to look like. And this, she gestured between us. This isn't it. I don't care what he thinks, Caleb said, his voice sharp. This is my life. Lila sighed, her shoulders slumping. I know, Caleb, but you know how he gets. He's not just gonna let this go. As if on cue, Richard appeared in the doorway, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Lila, he said, his voice calm but heavy. Go to your room. Dad, I'm not a kid, she started, but he cut her off with a look. Now, he said. Lila hesitated, glancing at us with an apology in her eyes, then grabbed her backpack and headed upstairs. The air grew thicker, the silence between us sharp enough to cut. Richard turned to me. You should go, Ethan. Caleb stepped forward, putting himself between me and his dad. He's not going anywhere. Richard's eyes darkened. This is my house, Caleb. My rules. Then maybe I don't belong here either. Caleb shot back, his voice shaking with anger. For a moment, no one moved. The tension was a living thing, coiling around us, ready to snap. I wanted to say something to diffuse it, but my voice was gone, stolen by the weight of Richard's stare and the fire in Caleb's eyes. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice low and final. You're making a mistake, son. Both of you. He turned and walked away, leaving us standing in the dim light of the living room, the echo of his words hanging between us. Caleb reached for my hand again, his grip tighter this time, like he was afraid I'd slip away. We'll figure this out, he said, his voice fierce. Together. I nodded, but deep down I wasn't so sure. Willow Creek had a way of breaking things that didn't fit, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were next. The next morning, the air in Willow Creek felt different, like the town itself was holding its breath. I woke up in my tiny apartment above the hardware store, the memory of Richard's words burning in my mind. Caleb had texted me at midnight. Meet me at the lake. 8 a.m. We need to talk. Lakeview Park was a short walk from downtown, a quiet spot where the water shimmered under the morning sun. Caleb was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench by the shore, his hoodie pulled up against the chill. At 24, he had a way of looking both fragile and unbreakable, like a piece of glass that had been cracked but refused to shatter. Ethan, he said as I sat down, his voice soft but urgent. I can't stop thinking about last night. Me neither, I admitted, my hands shoved deep in my pockets. Your dad, he's not gonna let this go, is he? Caleb shook his head, staring out at the water. He's always been like this, controlling. Thinks he knows what's best for everyone. He paused, his fingers tracing the edge of the bench. But I'm done letting him decide who I am. I wanted to reach for him, to pull him close and tell him everything would be okay. But the weight of the town pressed down on us. Willow Creek wasn't just a place. It was a mindset, a set of rules carved into every picket fence and church pew. 2 guys holding hands by the lake? That was a scandal waiting to happen. What do we do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Caleb turned to me, his eyes fierce. We fight for this. For us. I'm not giving you up, Ethan. His words hit me like a wave, warm and overwhelming. I reached for his hand, my fingers brushing against his, and for a moment it was just us. No Richard, no Willow Creek, no fear. Just the two of us, sitting by the lake, the morning light painting his face in shades of gold. But the moment didn't last. A truck rumbled by on the road behind us, and I pulled my hand back, instinct kicking in. Caleb's face fell, just for a second, but it was enough to make my chest ache. I'm sorry, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. Don't be, he said, but there was a crack in his voice, a hint of the hurt he was trying to hide. I know it's not easy, not here. We sat in silence for a while, the lake lapping gently at the shore. Then Caleb spoke, his voice steady again. I want to tell people, not just Lila, everyone. My heart stopped. Everyone? Caleb, this town. I know, he said, cutting me off. I know what they'll say. I know what they'll do. But I'm tired of pretending. Aren't you? But I was also terrified. I'd grown up here, same as Caleb. I'd seen what happened to people who didn't fit. Whispers, cold shoulders, jobs that suddenly disappeared. My mom had raised me alone after my dad left, and she'd always said, keep your head down, Ethan. Don't give them a reason to talk. But Caleb wasn't like that. He was fire, burning bright and unafraid, and I loved him for it. I was also scared to death of it. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Lila. Dad's pissed. He's asking where Caleb is. Be careful. I showed Caleb the message, and his face darkened. He's not gonna stop, he said, standing up. Come on. Let's go somewhere he can't find us. We ended up at the old drive-in theater on the edge of town, a relic from the 70s that had been abandoned years ago. The screen was cracked, the lot overgrown with weeds, but it was ours, a place where we could breathe. We climbed onto the hood of Caleb's beat-up Chevy, lying back to stare at the sky. Do you ever think about leaving? I asked, my voice barely audible over the crickets. All the time, Caleb said. Somewhere big. Somewhere we can just be. Seattle, maybe. Or San Francisco. I tried to imagine it. Us in a city where no one knew our names, where we could walk down the street holding hands without looking over our shoulders. Felt like a dream, too big to hold on to. Then let's do it, Caleb said, turning to face me. Let's leave. After I graduate next month, we could go. Start over. My heart raced, torn between hope and fear. What about Lila? Your mom? Your dad? Caleb's face softened. Lila's got her own path. Mom, she'd understand eventually, and Dad, he trailed off, his jaw tightening. He doesn't get to control me anymore. I wanted to believe him, to believe in a future where we could be free. But as the sun climbed higher, casting shadows across the cracked pavement, I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard Monroe wasn't done with us yet. The next week was a blur of stolen moments and whispered plans. Caleb and I met in secret at the lake, the drive-in, the back booth of the diner when we knew no one was watching. Every touch, every glance, felt like a rebellion, a quiet defiance against the weight of Willow Creek. But the town was closing in. It started with the looks. Old Mrs. Hargrove at the grocery store, her eyes narrowing as she saw us laughing together in the parking lot. Then Tom, the bartender at Rusty's, who'd always been friendly, suddenly turned cold when I mentioned Caleb's name. Word was spreading, and it wasn't just whispers anymore. On Friday, I got a call from my mom. She was 48, tough as nails, with a voice that could cut through any bullshit. Ethan, she said, her tone sharp. People are talking. About you and that Monroe boy. I froze, my phone pressed against my ear. What are they saying? You know what they're saying, she said, softer now. This town, it's not kind to people like you. I just want you to be safe. Safe. The word felt like a cage. I wanted to tell her about Caleb, about the way he made me feel alive in a way I'd never known. But I couldn't find the words, not when I knew she'd worry, not when I knew she'd beg me to keep my head down. That night, Caleb and I met at the drive-in again. He was quieter than usual, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying something heavy. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting next to him on the hood of his car. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed me a text from his dad. "We need to talk. Now." "He's been watching me," Caleb said, his voice low. "He went through my phone last night, saw our messages." My stomach twisted. "What did he say?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "He called me a disappointment, said I was throwing my life away. For you." The words hit like a punch. I wanted to say something, to make it better, but all I could do was reach for his hand. He let me take it, but his grip was loose, like he was slipping away. "I'm not ashamed of you," he said, his voice fierce. "I'm not ashamed of us. But he's my dad, Ethan. And he's not gonna stop." We sat there in silence, the weight of his words settling over us. I thought about my mom, about the town, about the life we dreamed of in Seattle. Felt so close, but so impossible. The next day, things got worse. I was at work, restocking shelves at the hardware store, when Richard walked in. He didn't say a word, just stood there, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. My boss, Mr. Jenkins, glanced between us, sensing the tension. "Ethan," Richard said, his voice calm but cold, "we need to talk." I followed him outside, my heart pounding. The street was quiet, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement. Richard stopped by his truck, his arms crossed. "I told you to stay away from my son," he said, "but you didn't listen." "I love him," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "And he loves me. You can't change that." Richard's face didn't change, but his eyes darkened. "You think this is love? You're dragging him down with you. You're gonna ruin his life. He's not a kid." I shot back, my voice shaking. "He gets to choose." Richard stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't get it, do you? This town doesn't want you. And if you keep this up, I'll make sure you're gone." The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. I wanted to fight back, to tell him he was wrong, but the words wouldn't come. All I could think about was Caleb, his smile, his touch, the way he made me feel like I could be more than just the guy who faded into the background. That night, I went to the lake, hoping Caleb would be there. He was sitting on the same bench, his knees pulled up to his chest. He looked tired, like the fight was draining him. "Dad's giving me an ultimatum," he said, his voice barely audible. "He says if I don't end things with you, he's cutting me off. No tuition, no home, nothing." I felt like I'd been kicked in the chest. "What are you gonna do?" Caleb looked at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I don't know, Ethan. I don't know." The days that followed were a haze of fear and hope, each moment with Caleb feeling like it could be our last. We kept meeting in secret, stealing moments at the drive-in, the lake, anywhere we could be alone. But the town was watching, and Richard's shadow loomed over us. Lila tried to help. She'd sneak Caleb out when Richard was at work, cover for us when he asked too many questions. "You two are idiots," she said one night, grinning as she handed us takeout from the diner. "But you're cute idiots." Her support kept us going, but it couldn't erase the fear. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced myself for another threat from Richard or another warning from my mom. The town was closing in, and I could feel it, the walls getting tighter, the air getting thinner. One night, Caleb showed up at my apartment, his face pale, his hands shaking. "He kicked me out," he said, his voice breaking. "Told me I'm not his son anymore. I pulled him inside, my heart racing. What happened? He found out I was still seeing you, Caleb said, sinking onto my couch. He said I had to choose him or you. I chose you. The words should have made me happy, but they terrified me. Caleb had given up everything, his family, his home, his future. For me, I held him as he cried, his body shaking against mine, and I promised myself I'd make it worth it. The next morning, we made a plan. Caleb had some money saved from his part-time job at the library, and I had a little from the hardware store. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get us to Seattle. We'd leave in a week after Caleb's last exam. A fresh start, a new life. But Willow Creek had other plans. 2 days before we were set to go, Richard showed up at my apartment. He didn't knock, just stood outside, his truck idling in the street. I opened the door, my heart in my throat. "I'm giving you one last chance," he said, his voice low. "Leave my son alone, or I'll make sure this town knows exactly who you are." I stood my ground, my hands clenched at my sides. "I'm not leaving him, and you can't scare me into it." Richard's eyes narrowed, but before he could say anything, Caleb appeared behind me, his bag slung over his shoulder. "We're done here, Dad," he said, his voice steady. "I'm leaving. With Ethan." Richard's face twisted, a mix of anger and pain. For a moment I thought he might hit one of us. But then he turned and walked back to his truck, slamming the door behind him. We watched as he drove away, the roar of the engine fading into the night. The next day, we packed what little we had and got on a bus to Seattle. Lila came to see us off, her eyes red but her smile fierce. "Don't you dare forget me," she said, hugging us both. "And don't let this town win." As the bus pulled away, I looked out the window at Willow Creek, its quiet streets and tidy houses growing smaller in the distance. Caleb's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Seattle was loud, chaotic, alive. We found a tiny apartment in Capitol Hill, a neighborhood where no one cared who we were or who we loved. Caleb got a job at a bookstore, and I started working at a coffee shop, pouring lattes and dreaming of something bigger. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Months later, Lila sent us a letter. Richard had softened, she said. He didn't understand, not yet, but he was starting to ask questions, to listen. She thought he'd come around in time. I hope she was right, for Caleb's sake. That night, as we sat on our tiny balcony, the city lights stretching out below us, Caleb leaned his head on my shoulder. "We made it," he said, his voice soft but sure. "Yeah," I said, kissing the top of his head. "We did." And in that moment, I knew we'd fought for something worth having. A love that was ours, no matter what anyone else thought. Willow Creek had tried to break us, but we were stronger. Together, we were unbreakable.